Reddit, what's the dumbest thing you believed as a kid? When I was pretty young, probably about 5 years old, I met the Black Power Ranger and got a picture of him signed. In the picture you could see that he was missing his middle finger, and my mom told me it was because he had flipped his mom off, so she cut it off. I believed it until I was about 20 years old, when my mom told me she had lied about it and didn't actually know what happened. Growing up, I told so many people this guy's mom cut his finger off. Google says an undisclosed accident when he was 4. So unconfirmed his mom cut it off. I believe it actually happened while he was on the show. It was the episode with the pig monster. Weren't they all pig monsters? Aren't we all? Once I was playing with some toys and my mom was talking on the phone to her friend. I guess they were talking about kids growing up and having families someday, because my mom puts her hand over the phone and asked me if I wanted kids someday and if I wanted boys or girls. I gave it some thought and said that I wanted one boy and one girl. For the longest time after this, I thought that it had been completely decided, like my mom was just on the phone with whoever you call to place an order for kids, and my order had been finalized. Order within 1 minute for delivery tomorrow. Still waiting on my house post delivery, they were shipped months ago. Typical. Don't give Jeff Bezos any ideas. People don't like people that grow vegetables in their house. I secretly celebrated my mom's poor in-house gardening skills because her tomato plants never had any tomatoes. I was about 11 when I figured out what those tomato plants were. Oh, so you wouldn't tell people? Funny thing is, my older brother had no recollection of this incident, or that they grew weed in our attic, and he was a part of the discussion. I was about 6 and he was 8. And it was family sit-down style. There really isn't another way to get that result. So I think it's clever, but led to some unintentional and confusing bias, I'm sure. Nah, just led to a moment where I had some serious flashbacks to my early childhood. Why is there a cigarette holder in a boat? Oh, you can use it to pull out hooks. While a farmer burned wild weed in the distance, none of my friends knew what that smell was. But I did. When we did the drug unit in school, a few items looked vaguely familiar. I didn't say anything to my mom until she was giving me the 3rd degree on my college exploits. She about passed out when she realized exactly what I all remembered. Short-term memory is shit, but I know details of my childhood that haunt my parents. That actors/TV characters would have to come back into a studio for each rerun of a show/movie. I would always be so amazed that people would have the time to go into a room with a camera multiple times a day just so I could watch them do the same thing over and over again. I used to think that laugh tracks were somehow real life, like I was hearing everyone else laughing who was watching the same show I was. In hindsight, this is really stupid. Obviously the sound is coming from the speakers, but growing up we only had TV at my grandma's place, and I remember laughing really loud when the laugh track came on so all her neighbors would think I got the joke too. I thought that it was a live show and the laughs came from the audience. Some shows do that. The IT Crowd famously filled their audience with actual IT professionals. One of the most authentic laugh tracks a show has ever seen. That my grandma G had a glass eye, and that she lost her eye in a bar fight. Nope, took me until I was 20 to discover she just had a lazy eye, and my dad and his brothers always told kids that story every holiday meetup. Edit. My grandma G has had 8 children and raised 9. She once told my cousin she'd run them through with a broadsword if she kept up her attitude. She introduced me to Puff the Magic Dragon when I was 8. Lol, my grandma actually does have a fake eye, and I used to think it was just lazy. One of my great aunts had one. Well, part of one. It was a sort of like a glasses lens, that looked like an eye. It wasn't round, just curved and flat. She was really old and we went to her birthday party. It fell out into the cake when she was trying to blow out candles. Okay, I'm not into cake that much anyways. Most fake eyes are like that, they aren't marbles. I thought that drinking and driving meant any drink. I burst into tears the first time I heard about drinking and driving. My dad always had a Dr. Pepper when we went places, and I thought he was going to go to jail forever. I distinctly remember yelling at my dad after he filled up and grabbed a chocolate milk and took a sip as we drove out of the gas station. Everyone in the car started laughing at me. I just want us all not to die. As long as his BCMC is below the legal limit, he's good. A sip won't kill you. Me too. I told someone my mom drinks and drives all the time, so it probably isn't that bad. Word got back to my mom about that and she was mortified. She's a Mormon and that made it even worse. I lived on an Air Force base growing up, where they check IDs to get back on base. The DARE people had just been to my school. My mom had a fresh Diet Coke in her cup holder, and I was instructed to tell a trusted adult if a parent was drinking and driving. So going back on base, I spoke up to the guard checking us in. You can imagine how well that went over, and even after that ordeal, my mom still didn't explain the difference between a Coke and a beer, as she didn't want me to know anything about alcohol, so I just lived in fear that some drinks were okay and others weren't, and I didn't know how to tell the difference and if my mom would get pulled over for having a Dr. Pepper instead of a Coke one day. Like even my 2-year-old knows some drinks are only for adults and some drinks are okay for everyone. I don't think it's that hard to put into kid-friendly language. Edit. I just remembered they also talked to us about drugs and smoking and how even chew is bad, but I didn't even know what that was and they didn't explain it, so in my little sheltered brain I thought the chewy candy I got for Halloween was also bad and a drug. I'd seen cigarettes from my friend's parents so I understood that, but they didn't go into detail what chew was, so I thought anything labeled chewy was bad. Fuck dare, they made me a very paranoid kid and didn't explain things properly. Just fearmongered to kids who couldn't understand or comprehend what was being said to them. They made me afraid of candy instead of properly explaining things in a way kids could understand. My stepdad had an old truck with 2 gas tanks that he would flip a switch to change from one to the other. He had us convinced that he would magically steal gas from other vehicles. He would tell us to pick one and we would watch the gas aisle go from E to F while driving on the highway. Blew my mind. I had an '83 Ranger like that. I always emptied the back tank first. My sister borrowed it and ran the front tank dry without telling me, and I ran out of gas in a really remote place. White 2 tanks and not just one bigger one. It's in case one gets punctured. You know those animatronic dinosaurs at museums? I knew they were robots, but as a child I was convinced that the robot was unaware of its animatronic status. I believed that if the robot wanted to, it could and would step over the barrier and eat me and everyone else. This fear was compounded when my dad, more than once, picked me up and pretended he would drop me down the other side of the barrier. I still remember the giant robot scorpion at a local museum when I was a kid. That thing scared the living shit out of me. This sounds like the Natural History Museum of London. Or Mortal Kombat History Museum. My dad used to make stir-fry fairly often, with chicken. One night as I was eating it I asked what the meat was. "Octopus," he replied. Seemed logical enough at the time, so I just accepted it and moved on with my life. From then on whenever we had stir-fry someone would inevitably ask, "How's your octopus?" And I would answer, "Fine." Or something similar. Fast forward, I'm 18, home from college on break and we're having stir-fry. "How's your octopus?" "Fine, you guys are all assholes." Edit. Thanks for the silver. My first award ever would be for being an idiot. One time when I was little my grandma made us chicken fingers. But they were kinda burnt and skinnier than normal for some reason. And for some fucking reason everyone, my grandparents, my parents, my aunts, my uncles, everyone did their damnedest to convince me they were worms that they had breaded and cooked up. I had no idea why they did this because all it did was make me not want to eat them. And then instead of admitting that they were not in fact worms, they just started saying that worms were perfectly edible, that my mom would eat worms right from the yard while playing as a kid. And then they started eating the worms to show me that they were safe to eat. Eventually I took a bite of one, just tasted like burnt chicken fingers. But that's all I ate. Because I didn't want to eat worms. To this day I do not understand why they did that. When I was very little and my parents were trying to get me to try steak for the first time, I refused until they told me it was just black chicken, and I went on to eat my grandfather's entire steak dinner. I thought a baby just randomly appeared in a woman's womb. I stayed awake crying about it because I didn't want to become pregnant. Same, oh my god. And at one point I somehow got the idea that stepping on grass was what made you pregnant, that there were little thorn things too small to notice in the grass, and they took years, but they traveled up to your belly and made a baby in there. But the years could depend, that's why people had babies at different ages. I was so scared that it would happen to me. That maybe I just stepped on a faulty thorn that only had like 5 years on it and I would get pregnant at 8. I had no idea where I got this idea from. Where on God's green earth could you have gotten an idea like that? Maybe because dads really like cutting the grass but are actually just protecting the women in their lives. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you have a similar story, share it in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe for more. Have a great day, or night.